Hi everyone, welcome back to Farrand on Film. Today I'm bringing you my review of the new film Duchess, written and directed by Neil Marshall, who you may have known from things like Dog Soldiers and The Descent. So Duchess follows a tough working class petty criminal who morphs into an anti-heroine to be reckoned with in a murky underworld in the treacherous world of diamond smuggling. Now, Duchess is getting a limited release, a select UK cinema release on the 9th of August. That's this Friday, the 9th of August, and will be available on digital download from next Monday, the 12th of August. So, first of all, thank you to the filmmakers, thank you to Vertical Entertainment and Strike Media for allowing me to watch this early and get this review out there. So, like I say, it's directed by Neil Marshall, who I first came across in terms of Dog Soldiers. And then things like The Descent. He then went on and directed things like Doomsday, the remake of Hellboy, and he's done odd episodes of things like Game of Thrones, or I think it's House of Dragon rather than Game of Thrones. So he's quite a prolific director, and I was looking forward to sort of checking this one out, thinking that I want to know what it is that he's up to next. I want to know what he's sort of following things up with. And Duchess looked like it was a sort of a different take on what he would usually kind of approach. In that, if we're considering things like auteur theory, if we're considering things like genre conventions and things like that, it looks like this would have been a film that he could sort of get to grips with doing something a little bit different than the sort of horror stuff that he'd done in the past, but maintaining his ability to make things quite brutal and action and things like that. Um, so it starts off with Scarlett in a bedroom, or like an apartment type thing, donning luscious red hair and with an American accent, and she's sort of leading somebody on, and it looks like it's almost like a prostitute type situation, sex worker type situation. Um, and very quickly it appears that that isn't the case. And we get one of those things that are becoming more and more prevalent in films these days, where they sort of go, "Hang on a minute, we're way too far into this. Let's go back. Let's rewind a little bit and let me tell you a little bit more about this story." So we end up going back, and we start to see Scarlett. This time she's in a nightclub. She's wearing quite a skimpy dress, and basically we need to know right at the beginning of the film that Scarlett is young, that she is quite aggressive, not aggressive, but I suppose she's pretty tough. And that she's sexy and that she's good looking. And the way that we sort of get that is, like I say, we see her in a club. She's in a short dress. She's dancing around. She attracts the attention of a number of different men, including Rob, who becomes quite a significant character in the film. He's an ex-marine. He ends up as the love of her life. Those are her expositional words, not mine. And we then see her boxing, but because she's boxing, obviously that shows us that she's quite tough. But actually, we're seeing her make quite a few rookie mistakes, and even somebody in the boxing gym sort of refers to her as newbie or something like that. So again, we're seeing that she's still quite young, she's still quite naive and new to the things that she's doing. The script overall for the film is fine, although there are moments where weak exposition comes in and weak sort of moments of, if I was marking it as a script for my students, I would say to them, can you not show us that rather than telling us that? So there's one scene quite early on where Scarlett goes back to her brother's apartment, and instead of maybe, showing us a picture of two young kids, one with blonde hair so we know it's Scarlett, one with darker hair so we know it's the brother, in like a photo frame or something. Instead, Scarlett enters the apartment and goes, "Hi, little bro." Nobody really talks like that. Okay, so there are a number of different times where the script will do that. The script is co-written by Neil Marshall and by Charlotte Kirk, who plays Scarlett, and I want to come back to that in just a little bit. But there are moments of slightly clunky dialogue in places that I think realistically could have been tightened up before they end up making up the sort of the final script. Still on the script, so speaking of things like character development, the character development is rough in that there's a point where Scarlett and Rob are in bed together, and she touches his watch, or he touches his watch, and she says, "Oh, it's all right, I don't charge by the hour." And he says, "No, no, no. It was my brother gave it to me as an 18th birthday present, and then he died 2 weeks later." And it's like, "All right, okay, we're going straight there, are we?" So again, there's a lot of things that just feel like you've missed bits out. You've not fully developed this character, and instead you've just sort of gone, "I need to tell you that your brother's dead." there you go, my brother's dead. The gender politics of it. Now, this is one of these things where you see the poster and the thumbnail that I've done is the poster where you see a woman holding a gun, and straight away you think of like a female John Wick. Your mind might go to things like Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron, even maybe going as far back as Hannah. But you think of films like that, you think of like badass women. But the gender politics of Duchess essentially boil down to I'm an attractive woman who uses her looks to get what she wants, but I'm also one of the lads, so pass me that PlayStation controller. In that, like, yeah, she's going around and she's using the looks and she's getting everything that she needs, but don't get it wrong. I'm not a woman's woman. I'm not a sort of one to be passed over. Chuck us a beer, chuck us that PlayStation controller. There's a voiceover that happens throughout the film by Scarlett, who has a thick Cockney accent in the film, and it very much outstays its welcome. But the thing that you will be remembering Duchess for is its bloody and brutal violence, which is accompanied in most cases by a non-diegetic 70s funk throwback soundtrack, which at first you might think, oh, that's a bit of an odd choice. That there's a scene in a car park where you think, hang on a minute, does that really work? But I would imagine that it's a purposeful choice to throw back to the exploitation movies of that sort of 70s era. But then when you talk about throwbacks to exploitation films, you then end up with the inevitable comparison to people like Quentin Tarantino, with this film's got on-screen graphics that realistically could have been pulled from things like Kill Bill, or the style of font, which is actually a little bit more similar to Black Dynamite rather than anything else. Um, Again, the exposition, the violence, pretty much everything else, you can throw this back to Tarantino. And I saw the opening credits, and the opening credits do say, like I mentioned before, that it is co-written by Neil Marshall and Charlotte Kirk. Did a quick Google search, quick glance on Wikipedia. They are engaged to each other, thrilled, but there's a lot of things that happen in the film, indulgence-wise, that begin to make a little bit of sense. This is very much, it feels more like not necessarily a passion project, but it feels like an individual, but I'm talking about two people, project between these two, where they are putting Charlotte Kirk on screen as a character who is extremely prominent, extremely badass. I think it would be not naive, but it would almost be a little bit too forward thinking of me to assume that they're going to try and run a franchise with this. But I think that realistically, with things these days where you get a character and you get a badass character, there's usually that sort of like, oh, I wouldn't mind seeing a second one. I wouldn't mind seeing a second one. So are they trying to do that? Are they trying to get a character off the ground more than anything else? And then this becomes their origin story. Um, I don't think it's going to terribly bother the box office. I think its release of it being in select UK cinemas obviously is hindering that anyway. I think it's going to be one of those things that when it goes to digital download, it might pick up some steam. In that I began to notice that on things like iTunes, that when a new film is released that week, it usually is quite popular because it's a new film and people go to buy it. But I think ultimately, when it finds a home for a free to view thing like a Netflix or a Prime or something that's included in the subscription, that's probably where it's going to find its audience. I struggled with the exposition. I struggled with some of the acting in it. Um, there are scenes in it, there are little bits in it that made me sort of go, oh, that's quite interesting. That's quite innovative. Stuff involving gas stoves and irons and stuff like that, that ultimately are the things that you will remember and the things that you'll sort of take away from it. I didn't necessarily feel bothered by some of the things that happen in it. Again, I think it's one of these where they're almost becoming a genre of their own, and I did my best to try and not think too much about John Wick. I think it's very easy for somebody to maybe publish a review of this film with the quotation of something like Jane Wick or move over John Hayes Jane Wick. But realistically, these are becoming a law unto themselves, these types of films, where they will do decent enough, they will do well enough, they'll probably get the money back, and your sort of Covent Garden mainstream audience are gonna go, "Oh, that was all right, weren't it?" And I think essentially that's all that this film can necessarily ask for. So this is Duchess. It is in select UK cinemas from this Friday, the 9th of August, and it's available on digital download from Monday, the 12th of August. I would recommend it if you're into stuff like this, if you're into sort of revenge action films. I don't think you should necessarily go in expecting something that's going to like blow your world apart. I think in places, like I mentioned, the script is very clunky. There are things that the film could definitely do without. It's almost 2 hours long. You probably could have chopped about 20 minutes off somewhere. There's a lot of sort of inconsequential things quite early on that happen, and things could have been sped up a little bit. But ultimately, this will find its audience. This will find people who enjoy it and watch it, and sort of think, oh, actually, that was pretty decent. And it wouldn't surprise me if in 2 years' time there's a Duchess Part 2 where she's just kicking ass somewhere else in a different European country. But like I say, that's Duchess. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Like I say, Duchess is released in select UK cinemas this Friday, the 9th of August, and it's available on digital download from next Monday, the 12th of August. Stay safe, look after each other, and I'll see you next time.